us the latest, Ken.
Here.
The
latest. Kevin Weeks, People's Insider, reporting John Tortorella to Philly as the offer, not done unless something's happened during lunch. Huss, I don't have it locked down, but I think the Jets are still very much in play for Barry Trotz. I think there are still a couple of moving parts in terms of maybe there could be some interest still from Boston. And then perhaps there's still some questions about Florida, what's happening there. But I think there's still a better than decent chance that Barry Trotz ends up with the Winnipeg Jets, Huss. Again, it's not confirmed, not locked down, but I still think there's strong consideration being given. And it would not surprise me if he is the next head coach of the Jets. But like I said, it's still a little bit, the Trotz Watch is still in flux, I believe. And also some of the buzz around here is still a chance he may not coach at all this year. So it's still in a holding pattern. Let's go with that.
Let's face it, the real buzz all around the Stanley Cup final is probably a certain Twitter video that was dropped Monday afternoon trying to close the deal for when Barry Trotz to get here to Winnipeg. Did you see that?
Andrew, you're doing an incredible job on the promotion side, and the media folks have definitely been talking about the beer for life opportunity that has been brought up.
How do you say no to that?
Well, that's definitely fair. Barry is a guy who, the only thing I would say, Barry can afford his own beer, but hey, it's an enticing offer. There's no doubt about it.
What about it's one thing to be able to afford your own beer. The one thing that money can't buy is being iconically branded on your own beer for that. And again, we've got all sorts of potential names for the Trotz beer or lager. We'd put that up to Barry. All jokes aside, though, we've kind of talked about this standstill in the coaching market with many quality candidates, many great openings. Yeah. And the thought was that Barry Trotz would be the first domino. Well, Barry will decide to go, and then everything else will happen. It hasn't gone that way. He's certainly been playing this out and, going through all of his options, I would assume. And in the meantime, you mentioned Tortorella to Philly. Yesterday, Bruce Cassidy to Vegas. Right. What can we take away from those hirings? First off, your thoughts on them and maybe what that might mean for Winnipeg's position in the coaching hiring market.
Yeah, we talked about Bruce Cassidy last week, Huss. I think he would have been someone the Jets would have had some interest in just based on his pedigree and his, I think, .671 winning percentage with the Bruins, 1 Cup final, 6 playoff seasons. But to me, it seems like, obviously, Vegas had been linked to Trotz a little bit, but, they acted quickly and they got someone who they're very happy with. So what that means is Barry Trotz is definitely not going to Vegas, but that also made sense to us because of what we've been talking about from the beginning. The fact that if Barry Trotz is looking for a post-coaching career on the management side, the suite level in Vegas is fairly full with George McPhee and Kelly McCrimmon and the people that work on that staff. So I don't think that was ever going to be a strong consideration unless Barry kind of, eased back on the management side. In terms of Philly, to me, Philly doesn't make a whole lot of sense for Trotz, just based on where their team is. But Philly thinks their team is more advanced than a lot of the people who follow hockey say. Not that they can't get it turned around quickly, but I don't know if you're Barry Trotz and you're looking at that to be your last job. There's still a kind of a reloading portion that could still include some rebuilding, depending on what kind of moves they make in the offseason, and we know they're going to be aggressive. So to me, Philly makes some sense, but not a whole lot of sense to me. So to me, Florida is still, Sean and me have been talking about this for the last 2 days. I understand that Florida is still paying Joel Quenneville, but if you're a team that won the President's Trophy and got swept in the second round, and you're trying to put yourself over the top and you're not, who knows what's happening with Brunette, but if you're doing interviews and looking for an upgrade, tax-free state as well. But I guess, Florida, maybe they don't want to pay $10 million for 2 coaches. But Barry is a guy that could solve some of the issues in Florida too, but that's also what has made him appealing for Winnipeg from the very beginning as well. And we know there's family considerations too, Huss, right? For Barry with his son and with his family. So I still think there's some gravitational pull. Yes, we know it. Barry was in Dauphin on the weekend, but that was probably just to visit his family. It wasn't, a precursor to some announcement, but, once the next, the Cassidy domino fell, if the Tortorella domino falls, I think we're getting closer to when Barry's going to make up his mind. But as I've said this to you from the beginning, the issue when a team gets bounced in April is that it feels like everything is taking forever. But when you look at the calendar, it's only June, right? So I know everyone would like to get their situation sorted out. But much like, this very well from your, being a fan of the KC Chiefs. Bieniemy could never do those interviews, and then all of a sudden he was left without a chair all these times, right? So we know some teams are interested in guys like Derek Lalonde, maybe even Jeff Halpern. So I just think there's a lot of due diligence happening. And the other part of it, Huss, when you're looking at someone like Barry Trotz, it's a big, and Tortorella, those are big investments if you're looking at the high-end coaches that make the high-end kind of money. So I think teams are being thorough, and the people that are looking for those jobs are being thorough also.
Yeah, well, and it's such an important decision. You would expect nothing less of teams to be thorough and do that. But I think we've sort of understood that that's been happening. And another part of the reason why I think the Trotz Watch is at DEFCON 5 right now is that Elliot Friedman, widely regarded as the best in the game, has said that, and earlier this week, he wouldn't be surprised if at some point later on this week, there is some more clarity to Barry's situation. And I think that the Vegas hiring, and especially the Weeks bomb yesterday with Tortorella expected to go to Philly, and the offer there would indicate that we're in a situation that, maybe this timeline of Elliott's could very well be the case. Nothing's going to happen today, of course, because it's the first day of the Cup final, unless some insider breaks some news. But at the same time, Ken, time is of the essence, especially for a team, particularly the Winnipeg Jets, because this is just the first of a long laundry list of important decisions that this team needs to make. But it really does seem like the head coaching and who that guy is going to be could have some significant impact to what exactly they do, with players like Mark Scheifele and how the roster looks next year.
Yeah, for sure, Huston. Again, I know that people want this to happen in fast forward, but free agency only opens on around July 14th or so after the draft. So there could be trades the week of the draft for sure. But two of the participants that could be involved, the Avalanche and Lightning aren't making any trades in the middle of the Cup final, right? So there still is some time. And like I said, I do think things will be picking up here shortly. And I'm with Elliot. With 2 days in between games 1 and 2, of course there could be numerous coaching announcements over the next couple of days, but it's not a guarantee that it will happen. And I'm just like everybody else. I'm very curious to see how it goes, but I'm not sure we're going to see a press conference this week.
Let me ask you this. Considering Vegas is done, sounds like Philly's done. From all indications, there is a highly, likely, if we believe the best in the game, that Peter Dubois could very well be the Dallas head coach. Yep. I don't think a lot of people, and we haven't heard a lot of Barry Trotz being Detroit's guy.
Yeah,
that's sort of
doesn't make much sense.
We've known that Barry Trotz is the number one choice of the Winnipeg Jets. They've seemingly been in the mix right up until this point. The other jobs are getting filled. What, in your opinion, what's the biggest threat to Jet fans that are hoping that Barry Trotz is the next coach? Where's the wrinkle? Because it doesn't seem like it's these other teams right now, even with the reported $7 million offer that was thrown at Trotz by the Flyers.
Right. So for me, that's why I said earlier, Huss, I said the biggest impediment for any team is that maybe Barry takes a deep breath this year. Like we said, it was hard on him emotionally. He lost his mother. He could be making $5 million to not coach this year. So if you're having some doubt, you're already getting paid $5 million. There's no rush for Barry to be coaching next year, Huss. So to me right now, that would be the biggest impediment for him landing with the Jets. I've said to you from the very beginning, I don't see money being an issue. I think the True North would spend the allocated funds and invest that in the brand and the property and in the hockey club. So, for me, I think this just comes down to whether or not Barry is going to be ready to coach next season. And I think it's not a matter of if he wants to do it in his home province. I think he would be fine with doing that. But I think he's working more on the personal side of things before he comes to a decision. We've heard lots of different things and rumblings and everything else, but I honestly think Barry is being very thorough. And here's the thing. The teams need Barry more than Barry needs the teams right now, based on where his life is at. So that's not to say he doesn't want to do it or won't do it. But right now for him, it's an important decision, and he's taking the necessary time to come to that decision and leaving the Trotz Watch folks like us chasing as many calls as we can make. One quick thing I want to say, we've always talked about other candidates. My understanding is that Jim Montgomery had a very good interview in Vegas, still very much, I think, on the Jets' radar potentially as well. We've talked about him before. It'll be interesting to see what kind of happens next. A lot of people wondering about Boston. We're hearing around here that maybe Jay Leach might be the front runner. We're not saying Boston's going to be rebuilding, but so many of their players, Huss, will be missing at the start of the year. And then there's still the big question mark about Patrice Bergeron. So Jay Leach is a name that's been bandied about here. Outside of that, there's still, everyone is sort of chasing their tail, if you will. I mean, to see where things are going to land. There's a lot of, there's still some chairs open, but there's a lot of quality candidates that would be capable of filling those chairs in those other markets. So we should be getting clarity sooner than later, but it may still be a few days, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think the Jets have maintained and have shown by their actions that they're willing to be as patient as it takes to get their guy. But you can't be so patient to wait a year. They got a season coming up and some big decisions. So if that's
the thing, Huss, right? So quick one. If Barry wanted to wait a year, the Jets aren't going to give the job on an interim basis to someone and say, oh, by the way, you'll be head coach next year. How do you feel about being the associate to Barry Trotz the season after that? I mean, that's not going to be the case either. So, again, I think that the biggest thing, we know that fans are anxious and restless, but this is a decision the Jets have to get right. Based on their roster, like you had said, what's going to happen with Scheifele? What we're hearing around here, Huss, is that I think there have been steps taken towards trying to, I'm not saying mend the fences, but I would say I'm much less bullish on Scheifele being moved than I was previously. I don't think that Mark has asked for a trade. I know, Huss, I know what you've said before. That doesn't mean his agent hasn't. My understanding is that Scheifele's camp is totally fine with him being in Winnipeg. But sure, it could depend on what moves are going to be made and who's the head coach. But I don't think that Mark Scheifele has been begging his way out of town, even though a lot of our, interpretations of his
year. If you watched him play and listen to him talk, you would think that he was. What's changed, I guess?
What I'm telling you is this is what I'm hearing. I'm not saying this is not firsthand knowledge. I'm saying it's not necessarily a done deal that he will be on a different team. That's not to say it still couldn't happen. And I know that I thought it was more likely that he would be on the way out, and he still could be. But I think the interesting thing for me, two things, Huss. The Rangers exit, what's happening with Ryan Strome. If you're the Rangers and you have Shesterkin, you're a team that had trouble scoring at 5-on-5. What does Mark Scheifele do, Huss? He produces at 5-on-5 and on the power play. I mean, if you're looking at Zibanejad and Scheifele down the middle, given how well Mika has taken on the responsibility of becoming a two-way player, I could think there's an offer to be made there. Is it Philip Hedl? Is it Braden Schneider? Is it one of their high-end prospects on the back end? I mean, these are all things that will be under consideration. And the other team, I previously thought Boston until we heard about the injuries. Now I think it's more likely a team like Carolina maybe steps up and makes an offer. They're a team that feels like they've been on the precipice for a while, but same thing. They haven't been able to get over the top, and scoring has been one of their major issues. So maybe a Marty Necas makes sense in a Scheifele as part of a package. But here's the other part, and what Elliott has also been reporting. If Pierre-Luc Dubois is not ready to sign long-term at this time, I don't think the Jets run the risk of being down the middle without Scheifele or Dubois. And again, I'm not saying that Dubois is going to be moved either. I think the most likely scenario, if he doesn't get that long-term deal done, is a 1 year, either it's arbitration or it's a raise from his contract. And then they try to feel like they have 1 more year to convince him, sort of on the Jacob Trouba plan. You go for it 1 more year with him down the middle with Scheifele and Dubois, and you hope that the next coach can drill in on Scheifele to get back to that two-way playing game. and that Dubois maybe reconsiders his long-term future, and they kind of go from there. But I still think there's a chance there could be some, the Jets are one of those teams that could have a big impact on the offseason in terms of potential movement and in terms of potential, widening of the leadership core and potentially moving some pieces in and out, especially on the kind of the forward side. I mean, we also know there's a glut on defense that still needs to be remedied. So some of these deals that are potentially being talked about, I think there would be defensemen involved to kind of get some things sorted out, whether it comes to making room for prospects or moving on those prospects to upgrade the forward group.